Hey folks, can you chat on the right side? Check 1, 2. Hello. See 5 people in here. Okay, Spencer. A couple of you guys have usernames. Okay. Is it pretty clear? Oh, sorry about that. Does it get disconnected a lot? Check 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. Okay, so it's working for some. Okay, it's working for some people. Well, yeah. How about the dinner? Well, that's not good. Let's see here. Let me see. Okay. Well, let's see. We have 5 more people here. I think after the stream, I could probably post it up. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Darby says it works for him. Well, I guess everybody's looking at the same chat. Google Hangout was worse than this. I tried that, and with 3 people, it was kind of being problematic for me. Can if anybody, I see there. Well, I guess there'll be total 4 of us here. If could you um, um, type on the chat if you haven't, just so I see who's here. Okay, Ryan Paul says it works for him. Okay, I'm gonna give it a couple of more minutes. We'll see. Let's give it about 2 more minutes. See who else is coming in. Okay, I got Darby, Spencer, Ryan. Okay, so now we got 6 people, 7 with me here. Okay, if you've joined us, folks, you can, if you have any questions during the lecture, you can stop me or type in your questions. I have kind of 2 screens opened up here. Okay, Derek says it works for him too. Yeah, and I'll talk to you about how we're going to go on and what we're going to do, and then we can clarify everything. You can either type it here or we can work it out during through email. Yeah. Okay, what do we have here? Okay, like this works. Okay, just a couple of more minutes here, and we'll start to go on. Guess it would have helped for me to have posted this online beforehand. I'll put up uh, these lecture notes after um, we finish the Pahlavis. Okay, let me see where we started here. Okay, so yeah, let's work on. So we are basically going to do the best that we can here. I know some of you have presentations that you need to present to the class, which is not going to be an option, and I don't know how to kind of go around that, even considering I tried Google Hangout. It wasn't really working well, especially if you're posting your if you're casting your page. I might kind of look into this. Maybe I can find a workaround for that because the Canvas WebEx is not that great either on that. Yeah, so I was thinking people can record themselves, right, using Apple iMovie or just YouTube. So if you can't figure out a way to cast your um, presentation and to talk over it, you can just send me the slides and give your 15 minutes presentation. That works for me. But if someone is filming you in front of your computer screen, or you figure out a way to just on iMovie or whatever software you're using, have your presentation and like record your voice on top of that. That would be great too. You can send those to me. I'll grade them like that. If you don't want to do any of those and you've changed your mind, I accept papers now, just due to the circumstances here. So yeah, all that works. And as for the ones that have submitted me your paper, I've already graded them. I've left comments, my phone number, my email, all of these are on the syllabus. Contact me anytime. I usually get back to people immediately. So before I kind of start with this lecture, and I'll try to, if I'm saying words that are, I mean, there will be a lot of foreign words, I'll type them in the chat. So, if you're kind of taking notes and you want to kind of have the exact word, they'll be there on the right. Yeah, so before we started, are there any questions about anything? There might be a delay in here. Questions, concerns? No, nothing. Okay. Well, just so I know everybody's getting everything, just type in your first name real quick. I just want to know like what the delay is between this. Okay, between this what I'm talking and when you hear it. Yeah. So just go ahead and type in your first name real quick. Okay. I mean, okay. Ryan, I see you up there too. Okay, awesome, great, thank you. And I'll keep this. We'll cut it out as usual. I have my timing. I'm just feeling like I had something else going on here. Um, yeah, for now, I'm going to give everyone the not going to take a roll call. I'm gonna because it's a tough time right now for everyone. Just whatever special help you need, just go ahead and let me know, and we'll figure out something. Right? We're still going to make sure people are getting out of here with an A. All right. So, okay. So basically, when we stopped last time, we were talking about the tripartite alliance, um, and this kind of a post World War II world, right? And you have Mohammad Reza Shah, right? Um, who is the son of Reza Shah, who's after abdication of Reza Shah, who's sent to South Africa, and where he dies, his son is coronated, right? And he is basically coming to power as a monarch, but he's coming to a power in a world where this constitutional monarchy and this world of parliamentary power has kind of caught up, especially in the latter years of Reza Shah when he's dealing with foreign powers, right? So he's not coming into a world where there is absolute power for the monarch, right? I mean, the monarch is still a big deal, but it's a different world from the Qajar world. There is now an institution of parliament. It's filled with landlords, and former aristocrats from the Qajar, and statesmen who have semi kind of coalitions with the popular forces on the Iranian grounds, such as the land, like the people who have peasants working for them on their lands, and most importantly, the religious class, right? So the Shah is kind of has to vie for power in this new scene. I We basically talked about the development of I talked about the rial and all those stuff, the Iranian currency, and the institutions that were kind of developing. And I remember talking about the urban development of Iran at this time. Now, another force that is kind of coming up here, this is in the 50s. This will be the Tudeh party. Um, Yeah, and I'll put keywords on for each slide, and as I put these on, then you can just go on putting everything you see. But I'm going to pay more attention to this to my slides, just so I can articulate, to kind of communicate the dates and names to you more. So the Tudeh party, Tudeh in Farsi means mass, right, or masses, and it's important to kind of pay attention to the use of that word, because it is a party that is kind of purporting to um, present the will of the people, if you will, right? It's kind of a populist movement, and the populist movement is a left-wing populist movement. Now, the Tudeh party rises out of this group that are called the 53, and the 53 kind of is the number of how many people actually were in this party in the beginning. This is before there were Tudeh, and this is under Reza Shah, Mohammad Reza Shah's father. So the 53, just to say a little bit about them, they were a leftist group. They were mostly intellectuals, and they were part of this kind of new emerging petty bourgeois, right? This middle class that it's very small in Iran right now, but it's educated. He has There are city dwellers that have access to this gifts of modernity, right? Especially the institutions like colleges and stuff like that. So the 53, the leftists, they're democratic, right? So they have this idea of that that this new processes of parliament, and I talked about the structure of the parliament at this time, that in a sense the provinces and the people did elect a representative to send to Tehran, to the parliament. That I use the word majlis, right? Majlis is just means parliament. I just like to change the word a little bit just to kind of shift what you associate that word with, but they mean the same thing, and they're is, as we talked about, is constructed on European models. So yeah, so this 53, it likes this representative democracy, right? And they're reformists, right? They're very much they like some of those things that Reza Shah were doing, like modernization, developing bureaucracies, land reform, just changing the country. But they were not. They were also against his kind of dictatorship approach to it, right? And there was this antagonism, as we talked about, what classes or groups or interest groups in Iran liked what forms of changes in Iran, right? All of them liked something, they didn't like some other things, right? Um, some liked foreign involvement, some didn't. Some like land reform, some didn't, right? So he couldn't always please everyone. But nevertheless, Reza Shah jails the 53, and this kind of makes him a thing, right? It kind of makes him, it gives him a popularity after they're sent to jail. But after the abdication of Reza Shah, under Mohammad Reza Shah, a lot of political prisoners were released, and the 53 were one of those. But now they're coming to society as kind of a now they have a brand, if you will, of people who had opposed a totalitarian figure and whatnot. Um, so they decide to form this two-day party, right? So now, we're talking about 1940s here. We are a long way from 1917, right? I mean, even when you talk about Stalinism and later on Maoism, that is the world that you're going, but even those are getting old, right? In 10 years, Stalin is going to be dead, right? So, and it's like changes around the world from Ukraine to all over. They've kind of come and gone. But so these groups are leftists and they have Marxist tendencies, but they are not. I mean, this is very important. Keep this in mind. From now till 1979, right, the month before the revolution, you don't find any group, and this is even true with the religious oppositions, that does not want the monarchy, right? So it's very interesting to kind of read the text of what these people were saying, that they weren't anti-monarchical. They didn't even want the Shah to be gone, right? And this is very different, something like what Lenin wanted to do with the czars, right? Not just getting rid of the monarchy, but getting rid of the whole state, right? So there is a direct involvement of coalitions of workers with their lives, right? But this is not, there's no such thing in Iran. And then the other problem is that Marxism itself depends on an already developed capitalist system, or a country that is at least going through and has started to go industrialization. Now, there are industries in Iran, but it's not an industrialized nation. This is still an agricultural nation. It is slowly developing its oil, but it has no control over its oil, or very little, because the British own it, right? So this is so it's kind of hard to talk about the proletariat in Iran when there is none, right? The peasants are not the proletariat, right? So that's why the leftists in Iran had to really shift their understanding of Marxism and how they kind of talked about it, especially with the people. So it does kind of becomes this tiny middle class movement that has presence in the cities and among people who work in the cities and whatnot, but nothing too radical, right? But maybe radical for Iran at that time. So the Tudor party comes up, and they even get, by 1943, they get like 8 members elected to the parliament, right? So this is another thing. Like I said, this is a new kind of leftist, semi-Marxist groups, right? That are even willing to join the parliament, right? This is kind of if you look at these different formations around the world, again, China, Cuba, Soviet Union, even in Britain or in America, where there is a huge rise of socialist movement, because the parliamentary system is seeing itself as a bourgeoisie system that is kind of neutering the workers' movement, right? But this is not the case in Iran. They're happy to be in the parliament and be representing people as such. Um, so yeah, so they're monarchist, right? The leftists in Iran, and the today is the biggest one. They're parliamentary, right? And they're anti-fascist, right? And being an anti-fascist in Iran at this time, of course, soon you see the demise of the Third Reich, right? And Franco is still in Spain, but you also have Mussolini, who's hung with his wife in Italy. So there's a decline of fascist state powers, right? But tiny groups of it, even in Eastern Europe, right? They're squad. Like the Soviets go crazy on these people, right? Especially after the war, just um, eliminate them. They lose, of course, a lot of popularity with people. So this anti-fascist part is not so relevant here in Iran because fascism in Iran is there's ideological kind of sympathies to it, especially that idea of Aryanness and chosen people. But it's not a developed nation that can connect that high identity with a kind of a developed state, and then there's not a fascist state in Iran. There's a kind of absolutist monarchist, but that's a whole different thing. Um, so those are kind of the characteristics of the Tudeh that you want to have in mind. Um, later on, the Tudeh party does turn into a Marxist Leninist group. This is not even worth typing. Well, we'll come back to this later, but that's not going to be that. Um, uh, yeah, I'll come back to this. Just keep today on as such. Um, during this time, there's a new emergence in the political um, uh, kind of political kind of uh, plane of Iran, right, where people are vying for power. Um, so yeah, the Mossadegh had variety. So it's important. Mossadegh comes from a. He's connected to the Qajar dynasty, and it's if you want to go Google his looks, these are all very important. Actually, the way he's dressing up, like um, his physique is something that is part of his story. He's kind of this lanky, kind of got my kind of nose. He's got a very distinct features. Um, but he's a bureaucrat that's come from his on his mother's side. He's connected to the Qajar royalty, right? And he is but he is a modern man, if you will, in Iran. He's educated in France and I think Switzerland. He studied law, right, during the Reza Khan, Mohammad Reza Shah's dad. But he's also jailed during Reza Shah because he was very critical of again this total monarchy, not all of monarchy, just total monarchy. But Mossadegh's kind of main beef, if you will, is with foreign involvement in Iran, and that's what he makes his kind of primary political goal to get rid of these foreign involvement in Iran. That doesn't mean it's an antagonist to foreigners, and it's easy to kind of have that misconception when you're reading his words, especially when he's talking about British. But like always, like Soviet and British, you have to consider everything we've talked about uh, of this past 100 years of this tenuous relationship with these foreign powers. So yeah, so here's some of the roles that Mossadegh plays. After school, he goes immediately into politics, right? He was ambassador to different countries. He is a minister of foreign and national defense at different times. He's been a valet, right? Like a governor of a province. He's been a member of the parliament. But we will the role that we'll discuss that's relevant to our task here is a prime minister. He's kind of the most prominent prime minister of Iran, and that's partly because of this kind of his famously tragic story. So Mossadegh is different from gurus like parties because first of all, he sees this idea of appealing to um, the foreigners, right? Like Marxism, as something foreign, right? His tendency is nationalistic, so he's very much about national identity and national control of the governance of this country of Iran, right? And especially with the uh, uh, he's also very aware of his family's history of mismanaging Iran, and he sees kind of the mismanaging Iran and concession as a part of the backwardness of Iran. So this idea of developing a solid bureaucratic state that is in control of its goods and how it does things, and as a kind of an independent player in the world order as something indispensable. National Front Party of Iran, if I will, yeah, not to mistake it with the National Front fascist new party of Poland or whatever. It has nothing to do with Golden Dawn or anything like that. Um, Yeah, so let's kind of flush out his relations with the Shah, right? Because now we're just talking about these kind of forces that are in antagonism in this new developing nation that suddenly is trying to see itself as a unified state. As I mentioned, Mossadegh was jailed during Reza Shah, right? He's critical of him and his coronation. Um, um, and it's not that there is a coronation of monarchy. Again, it's particularly Reza Khan and how he's managing the state. Um, as a military man, he sees that as a problem. Um, he wanted to have a very independent. Um, um, Also, let me know if my voice cuts out or if there's any problem here. He wants a independent parliament that is very much separate from the monarch, right? He wants to kind of widen that distance between the two. That monarch has certain powers and the parliament has some powers. That's one of his goals. Um, and he sees the involvement of, as I mentioned, the British Soviet, and late now this is the development when American involvement is kind of a thing to talk about. He sees that as problematic, even though American involvement in Iran right now is very positive, as people see it or understand it. If we were to bring all this together and articulate it under one kind of idea, is for Mossadegh, it becomes the nationalization of Iran's oil, right? So all these different kind of political ideas that he has, you can consolidate into this. Iran's oil needs to be nationalized. So at this time we have to want to talk more about this 1940s going into the 50s. So at this time, the Shah is having problem with a lot of his prime ministers, and I'm from now on when I say Shah, Mohammad Reza Shah, right, the Reza Khan's son. I'll just refer him to him as Shah because that's what most people do that. But Shah just means king. It's neither his name or his last name. Um, so here's kind of the state of Iran at this time. So the Shah's having a lot of problem with his prime ministers, especially Qavam. He exiles them, he fires this one, brings another one. So he's still trying to find his place in this country. Because remember, and I showed you pictures, he's very young when he becomes coronated. As always, there are riots and uprisings across Iran, especially in kind of ethnically kind of consolidated places like the Kurdish population with the Turks in the north, always till today. That's the same things, and with the tribes that I talk about, right? I always talk about two, the Qashqai and this time is the Qashqai. I think we've talked about the other ones, and the Qashqai one. The last time we talked about is that their relationship to the British, because they're in the south in the Pars region, so they were kind of along with the British military that Britain had for its own purposes. This tribe was helping them. So it's Kashqa. Yeah, Kashqa. That's the name of the tribe. They are revolting, as I always say. They're very powerful. Um, there is faction inside parliament, and I think this is kind of alarming. I mean, alarming is interesting that from 1930s to 1940s, like the parliament just couldn't pass anything. And this went on a little bit into the 50s, but they came to pass off some stuff, but that was because there were a lot of factions inside of parliament. And this is, again, it is something new to this country, but they still cannot agree on to pass on anything at this point. So there's too much bickering going on in the parliament, which is frustrating Shaw at the same time. One, because he's not getting stuff done. Second of all, Shaw is very much, and this becomes, I talk about this more later, he's very sensitive to this idea of Iran not being modern as a kid who grew up studying abroad. Yeah, so there were again nationalist and socialist movements calling for autonomy, Kurdistan and Azerbaijan. Always to this day, this happens. And Kurdistan, I mean the Kurdistan province of Iran. Okay, not the Kurdish project of a greater Kurdistan province. And Azerbaijan, again, I mean Azerbaijan, the province in Iran, not Azerbaijan, the country. Um, yeah, and then there is another problem here. There the two other problems, and this is like we talked about the brief Soviet that develops in northern part of Iran. The Union, as the British did in the 40s, begin to violate the tripartite agreement. And we talked about this in previous slides. You refer to notes for the details of that agreement. So it starts again, kind of playing with its influences inside Iran, right? Because this is you're seeing the development of not but in the 50s of the Cold War, right? So we have won the war. Russia sacrificed a lot, so did British and so did Americans, and they want to carve the world up for a variety of reasons. Not all of it malicious or cartoonishly. Um, you can't fit it in the colonial narrative, all of this. But for some reason, the one being the oil that is discovered around Caspian Sea, right? Those countries that you see around Caspian right now, a lot of them are kind of are run by rich families, oil families. So there's a lot of oil in Caspian, and then there's the oil down south, right? So Soviet Union under Stalin becomes very interested in Iran again, and they kind of um, refused to follow through with the tripartite agreement. And then there is this uh, new emergence, and this is Fado Fado E. Yon Fadilione Islam. That's how you pronounce this. Fadilione is to fados to self-sacrifice. Fadilione Islam is this new emerging, um, very modern. We've never seen anything like this up until now of kind of what we would call Islamists right now. But these are not. Um, I have to talk about them more later on. But this is kind of there is no at this time. There's no conception of um, the reemergence of Islamic Empire. The Ottomans have already rejected it. There is no more caliph. These are Iranian Muslim groups that are starting to kind of respond through violence because they're losing power, right? And they're not necessarily in tune with the religious establishment in Qom and Najaf and stuff. They're kind of their own thing. They're very small, and they do commit a couple of assassinations in parliament. They're actually against the religious establishment because they see the establishment as either passively Safavi, passively Shiite, which has been part of Shiism for hundreds of years. This idea of not getting mixed with politics, but they're also against some of these religious leaders that are fond of the parliament, that they take part in it. So these are very small group. They're not even that important to talk about in the 40s and 50s, but they are there, and it's we have to kind of come back to them. By the way, any questions? And you have, I see that more people have joined us. Type them out. I see them up here. I'll try to answer them. Don't hesitate to stop me. Um, so, for example, in 1949, and this is February 4th, the Shah is assassinated. There's pictures of this, of him in the hospital. He's shot in the face. And this is very important. And I'm going to kind of keep this story for maybe, yeah, maybe the next time, because we don't have that much time here left today. But the Shah is assassinated, and this assassin is a member of the Tudeh party. But he didn't do this because there was a decision on Tudeh to assassinate or anything. Actually, these were kind of mostly intellectuals, or they're fond of parliamentary politics, not into this kind of guerrilla warfare or assassination. But a member of a Tudeh party assassinates Shah, which he survives through. Um, and this kind of brings a shift in Shah's approach to politics. He makes him wanting to be more like his father, right? So rather than dealing with people, he wants to use more monarchical power. For example, he exiles to Lebanon Ayatollah Khashoggi, and he starts dissolving the parliament. He does that briefly. The parliament comes back later on, but he also dissolves the whole of Tudeh party, and he makes the existence of against the law. Now this goes out later on. We'll talk about it. It comes back. The Shah does this a couple of times, that making parties outlawed and taking issues with the existence of parliament. Um, and it's very important to note here that this Ayatollah Khashoggi's to move to exile. This is at this. I mean, there is this new emergence in the Middle East, which is, of course, the Israeli government right now, which is going to start having problems with especially Lebanese displaced Lebanese dissidents in countries like Jordan and Syria and Lebanon. But you have to keep in mind, just because I say Lebanon does not mean like there is a like a all embracing exilist, the Islamist, embrace of these exiles, right? Shias are not very popular in the Middle East, and they're actually often seen as friends of Israel. And I go through that relation later on when we come to the 70s and the 80s, but it's important to keep that in mind. Um, let's see. Okay, we still got a couple of times. Um, so at the same time that the Shah is doing these, kind of bringing these changes as he sees the kind of this chaos going on, the nationalist movement in Iran is also. I think my headphones are running out of batteries. Hold on one second, guys. Oh, there they are.